I will I will have this conference mainly in three parts. I will tell you briefly a little bit about myself and where I come from this space research. Then expose a little bit about the themes we're living right now and the future of technology and also some part of psychology in in space. And then I would love for us to discuss a little bit about it. So I started learning as astronomy, studying astronomy and astrophysics here in Guatemala. And sadly, after the first year, they canceled the the university for studying this because there were only three people there. Soon after this, what I did, I started to build in the first ever space observatory here in Guatemala. I noticed that the main reason why people were not studying astronomy was because there was not a place where they could actually um, work after they had graduated or studied this. And we started on the project. At the beginning, we got a lot of flake from the people. They didn't like the idea, and it was quite shocking for me since they said, "Why are you building a space observatory in Guatemala when there are many other needs like building hospitals or schools?" And it's a fair point, but building a space observatory doesn't mean that they're not going to be building other schools or hospitals. And pretty much I wanted to start with this. So if we're talking about the future of mankind in space and space civilizations, I've heard a lot of times like, why do we want to go to another planet or to colonize other planets outside of the of Earth if there are a lot of things that are missing here? And then again, we don't have to pick one over the other, but we can actually go and do that. Uh, so having said that, that's where I come from, and we're starting to build the space observatory this year after 3 years of planning and fundraising. And what I want to talk about is where are we going with this uh, as a human civilization. First of all, if we are talking about how mankind has how to say this word in English, has comported, has done on the last couple centuries, is they've been globalizing more, they've been exploring, and right now we know all the places in Earth. And what will happen now? We're starting to see this second era of space exploration with a lot of private companies, with with the Falcon rockets, Blue Space, SpaceX, that we're starting to want to go again to the moon, to Mars. So it starts doing the questions like, where are we going? Why do we want to do that if there are so much things to make here on Earth? But right now, with the COVID-19, we actually realize that what we really need is to start to actually think ahead and not just 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, but maybe 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now, and how that mindset of survival will be able to actually further our chances of continuing exploration, not just now on Earth, but or the moon, but other planets, and eventually, if we get that technology, other galaxies, sorry, other planetary systems. Um, yeah, I see Homir is saying deep sea world is more unexplored than space. Definitely, it is. And I don't know if you've heard about the Seasteading Institute.
Yes, I have.
Mhm. So I think it's quite remarkable that they're doing that. And one of the main things that I like this Seasteading Institute is because at sea as well and in space, right now we're using the same legal frame. Did you know that?
Yes. It was, they actually put it in Netflix show Mars.
Oh yeah, the
uh,
one from National Geographic.
yeah, in terms of international waters, the same sort of framework.
So let's go with thinking about three stuff. If we talk about the legal things, it's whose space belongs to. I'm starting to see a little bit of a tendency with the Space Force from part of the United States already paving the way for future exploration, because once people start claiming planets, moon, spaces, asteroids, who will defend them? Or what kind of laws can be applied in like in international uh, maritime legal framework? Um, Definitely interesting with that. And one of the other two things that I would like to open discussion about is the long-term exploration of space. It's not that it's going to be a couple of months, maybe a couple of months if we are going to Mars, but if we actually find a planet on the on another planetary system, we're talking about years of traveling. We're talking about stasis. We're talking about how the mind of the human being will fare in space. What's space psychology? How do you react in those kinds of extreme situations when it's not just your survival, but the survival of potentially your own species? And how we are currently looking for those planets. It's basically called an exoplanet, and the exoplanets, they are looking in case of with telescopes based on their spectral pattern, they will be able to see what kind of elements are in that atmosphere. Once they do that, they determine the temperature or how far or long from their star they are. It's actually called the Goldilocks zone. And this Goldilocks zone is basically how warm or cold is the area of space that they are to sustain life. So I'm going to share a little image with you guys.
It's interesting you say that because I was part of an international space recruitment back in '93, where we had to design interplanetary missions. But obviously, computational power was a lot less back then. So interesting to see now.
So can you see my small diagram here? So what they're basically saying, if it's if the planet is too close to the sun, it's too warm to be able to sustain life, or the kind of life that we're looking for, water, a stable atmosphere. And if it's too far away, it will also be too cold to sustain life, to be able to harbor human life. So that's basically what we are looking for right now. But the main obstacle actually to be able to do this, it's the technology, of course. But that long range or planning in the long term of how are we going to be able to jump from this planet to others in case of, you know, destructive events or pandemics like we're seeing right now. It could be much worse than this, and it could actually decimate what civilization or what the world we see right now could be. Or an asteroid could hit, or another extinction level event, and then what is the end of civilization if not to be able to actually endure and expand? It's been happening on the last 10,000 years, and I'm sure it will continue to happen.
Emilio, why litter another planet? I think we deserve what we have created for ourselves.
Yes, I can see where you're going with that. I would actually try to compare it with what I said at the beginning. You know, it's not that all of us are littering it, but just hypothetically think that we find the balance and no one is littering anything. You know, we live in an utopia where people are not throwing waste, where we have a more sustainable way of living.
That's
But
Japan.
still, yeah, I love Japan. But still, an asteroid will be able to hit us, or something horribly happens, like I don't know, atomic war or a pandemic, and then the people who had nothing to do with this littering or this war or these health hazards are going to pay for everyone. That's 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 what I would like to expose. You know, it's not everyone who's littering it. Are we going to have to actually be condemned by the people who have not opened their eyes yet or don't have the education to actually do it?
Just making a joke.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to make a joke too. I spent the morning harvesting Mimosa hostilis fruit bark, which contains a 1 to 1.7% dimethyltryptamine when extracted from the plant. What about inner space travel? I mean, I think that DMT is ancient tech here, left from when we were probably a significantly more advanced species than we are today.
Well, I've done DMT a couple of times, maybe several times, you could say, and that is really an inner space travel. I know has anybody else tried DMT here? We're not recording, okay? So it can be.
You will be in jail in my place.
I think if you say specifically ayahuasca, then under UN treaty laws, it's not illegal. DMT might be illegal, but as long as it's in the natural plant form, it's not illegal as far as I know.
It's not illegal to have consumed drugs.
That one too.
So Asian tech of the mind. Of course,
Okay. Random thought. Has anyone here listened to Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock's work? Speaking of like asteroids and space travel? No? I highly suggest checking out some of Randall Carlson's work if you like ancient space type stuff. A lot of his work is around the Younger Dryas boundary, which is a thin matte layer when you dig down into the dirt that contains well, carbon-60 among other things, but nanodiamonds, shocked quartz, and a few other basic impact proxies. And he's got a mass amount of evidence that we had a massive cataclysm around 13,000 years ago, where we went from pretty much a full-on ice age, where Canada was covered in ice, and then within maybe 100 to 1,000 years, all the ice melted. And they look at the drumlins, which look like these massive rolling hills. But when you look from the satellite, it's pretty easy to see that this might have been one of the biggest floods in history. So what he's been doing is putting these pieces together of, what was Noah's flood, an actual historic event. In the times of writing something down, would we go through the effort to write something down that had only literary value, or was it probably one of the most, I guess, profound experiences the humans had gone through? So they go through a lot of stuff about like Göbekli Tepe being like some 12,000 years old, which is right after the last ice age. Randall Carlson's work is amazing, and it kind of breaches into that asteroid. Like, what are we going to do to prepare for the next? This is likely inevitable that we get hit again. When is a different question, but I see reason to want to go into outer space, but I think it also has to do with the ability of the humans to go into inner space a little bit more effectively.
I would think about when we're talking about the inner space, maybe to find, and not to go full esoteric here, but some kind of balance as a civilization to be more sustainable, more conscious, more peaceful, to whenever we go to those stars, we won't go and litter another planet, or it would be, the next hurdle for the civilization. What kind of values and what are we going to sustain and actually practice whenever we have that clean slate and go to another planet? What kind of government are we going to use? How are we going to act?
That's kind of like saying like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, like, oh, like I'll put it off to tomorrow. Like, we got to fix what's going on here before we can travel outward. I feel like there's a lot of waste and uncertainty and conflict here that would travel outward if we traveled beyond this planet. It would travel with us,
I'm sorry that I put the notion to this type of to turn the beauty of us being able to even migrate the whole planet to another planet, which is like mind-boggling that we can lift the whole planet to another dimension. But I think we can bring another aspect of it. There is a huge economy in space that we are going to face. So it will lift our capacity to unknown places where once we start exploring these possibilities. And I agree that at one point we will be cleaned once we come to the point where we have enough that we don't run to take a slice, rather we share. Then we can really address the more valuable things for all of us, which is science, education, health, ecology, arts, and so on and so on, where we don't need to anymore fund the arms. So I think then we can really start imagining and taking us everywhere. So I also think that the transition could be not only physical, but definitely we can have that experiences, very early on, virtual transitions and so on and so on. Once we are able to reach those places and we have all the capability to walk the walk. So I think there is, combining the Earth technologies with us being already in different planets would create us, tremendous opportunities that we are not aware. Probably That's fascinating aspect of what you are, working on, Emilio. I think this is really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Omar, were you going to say something?
Um, so, as I mentioned, in '93, I was part of an international consortium of students. I was only 13 then, so we had to run thought exercises around interplanetary missions, right? And instead of exoplanets, we had moons as targets. And so my team, which was two guys from CIS, one from Turkey and one from Canada, we came up with two proposals. One was a solar flare, solar sail, which captures the solar winds and is able to propel you. And the idea being, over time, with less friction, you can attain a higher velocity. But then we designed what was magnetism and taking ionized material right through it to garner propulsion. What's interesting is we spent so much time on designing the vehicle, and then the NASA crew were like, have you thought about sustainability of the crew that's on it? Right? Like sleep and a few other things. What's interesting is that now there's a philanthropist that's the solar sail project has gone nanoscale, so it can achieve more velocity by laser, because lasers can detect atmospheric distortion much quicker due to computational power. But as I said, computation's gone so much forward. I just wonder, as you look at space projects at the moment, are there other thought exercises that are being run in terms of getting escape velocity and then the second tier of the journey?
Well, I see right now space going into two very, very precise areas. One is the space exploration to Mars or the moon with the reusable rockets. And then is a lot of this industry of the stratosphere, a lot of satellite technology that we're using, but it's almost space, but it's not going so out there. I think that before we're going to be able to actually do that, because I read about the nanoscale solar sails, is two things. We must really have a breakthrough on our understanding of physics. I see maybe at CERN, they're the ones who are mostly doing these kinds of actual experiments, and right now they want to do a much bigger experiment there, and then be able to, I don't know, maybe AI, because in those nanocells they were talking about putting some kind of software or be used as probes for going there, see if there is life, and then coming back or sending the signal to be able to sustain this long-term space travel. That is what we need. Or a long-term space travel, or a way to actually do it faster than light. Those would be, the two main things that we're actually missing, and we have no idea when that's going to be starting right now. So that's why I say we have to plan decades ahead of this, because it will need to happen if we want to be, a spacefaring civilization, to be able to expand and survive. But all of the efforts have to be there.
Well, there's a good documentary on Bloomberg about space mining, which is kind of an interesting area. It's to grab materials out of asteroids or meteors, for example, whatever, because commodities that are in abundance in space but not here. just by virtue of the compression forces, I guess, or thermal reactions in space. And this is what we can recreate here. So maybe that's something else as well.
Thank you, Omer, and everyone for talking, being here. If you want to one time come to Guatemala and actually meet the Space Observatory, I'm putting my email there. Friend me on LinkedIn and on Facebook, on Instagram. That's my handle. Really, thank you for coming here, and I hope to actually catch you somewhere else and continue this conversation, or get to meet you all of these interesting persons. So be safe, please stay at home.